morning, and glad to welcome our next guest in as well. You know him well, William Russell, former advisor to the Trump campaign, state director here in Mississippi. He is a partner at Ballard Partners in Washington, D.C. Got the Capitol in the background this morning. William, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Richard. Thanks for having me once again. Good to be with you.
You as well. Thought yesterday was an interesting day with Donald Trump visiting Capitol Hill and speaking with and to Republican lawmakers, especially on the House side, and then kind of emerging to that gaggle of press afterward and throwing some cold water on the idea that he's being impatient and he's pushing too hard. It seems like he's got a pretty good grasp on the process in terms of getting the big, beautiful bill passed. What are you hearing on the street?
Well, I will say that earlier this morning, the Budget Committee passed out this big hurdle that we crossed over, passed out the bill, and that kind of keeps us on track for keeping to the schedule that Speaker Johnson has laid out. So while we see the president getting pretty engaged in the process, this is not anything new out of a Trump administration. The president, during 4 years, his last term, was very involved with the legislators on Capitol Hill. So that's not new. But I think that kind of last time we were together, we kind of talked about this, right? Sticking to the mandate, making sure that senators and congressmen who were a part of the win last November kind of followed through on what the American people have laid out for them. And so this is not anything new. I'm not surprised by any of this. And the fact, again, the Budget Committee passed out the big beautiful bill. So we're on track.
1 a.m. Eastern or something like that when that was distributed last night. There were a couple of comments from people who were in the room that struck me as, I don't think people would have said this in his first term. They called President Trump spellbinding. Unscripted for half an hour, used the term spellbinding, and then also talked about him in his role as the closer. I'm not sure that's how he would have been characterized 7 years ago.
I think that there were some nuances that the president picked up on and is now executing upon. I mean, and that's truth be told, that's kind of the way that the president needs to be. He needs to be that closer. Like, if the president comes in at any point shorter than that, like, we're fighting an uphill battle. I think that he knew that the blue state Republicans needed to hear, like, stop arguing about salt. That's what you're going to get. The salt tax. I think that he needed to tell the hawks, the fiscal hawks on the right, like, we're done with Medicaid cuts. This is what we're going to get. Everyone stop fighting. This is the negotiation. We are done negotiating, and we're moving forward with this bill. And so we saw it pass out. Now, what happens next? That's the question. It's going to get out of the House, but it's going to go to the Senate. And they're going to do it a complete gut and replace. They're going to keep the name, but that's about it. Nothing else is going to change, or everything else is going to change. Excuse me.
What are the key changes that you think the Senate's going to roll out?
Well, we're going to see some changes to foreign aid. I don't think that the Medicaid cuts are going to be as stiff as what we see right now in the House bill. There's just going to be a softening about the entire bill that the House Republicans wanted to put forward and successfully put forward. The Senate's not going to do that, and we've seen kind of some changes and some overtures to, specifically in the foreign aid space, that these senators are not going to relinquish. And I think there's going to be more spending, the Department of Defense, just naturally, all the kind of things that the Senate usually steps up. I mean, Roger Wicker has done a wonderful job as chairman of the Armed Services in the Senate, and I fully expect him to fight for more funding for the Department of Defense. But that's going to be a good thing for Mississippi, right? That translates down to the Space Center. It translates to manufacturing, technology here. And we've seen that kind of the growth in the state of Mississippi. I mean, our GDP numbers, I think we put us at number 2 last year in 2024 for growth throughout the entire 50 states. And that's because I think in part the spending the spending that we're doing as a government for R&D, and that's directly translates to the Mississippi economy.
Yeah. When you characterize the Senate as the entity that is going to soften this bill a little bit, regardless of who's in charge, whether it is a Republican White House or a Democrat White House, is that kind of the role of the Senate? That, like, whether it's, you've got a majority Republican or Democrat, the House is a little more radical. They like to push the envelope a little bit more with some of their legislation, and then it goes across to the Senate, and they're like, oh, that's cute. No, we're not doing that. Here's what we're willing to do. Is that kind of the role of the Senate, regardless of who's in charge?
I would say so. Isn't that interesting, the yin and the yang that we have between the chaos that happens in the House? And I say that affectionately. I'm a House guy, having worked for Congressman Allen Nunley, the late Congressman Allen Nunley. Like, that was some of the most fun times in the House, was working for his office and being involved. But I would agree that, I mean, it's a unique breakdown. You've got kind of craziness happening in the House, and then the statesmen over in the Senate who are saying, okay, let's be a little bit more tempered. Let's be a little bit more measured in response.
Although much of the Senate a little less statesman-like than I think many of us thought we would ever see in our lifetimes, with some of the rhetoric that comes out.
But isn't that the nature of politics? Isn't that kind of just writ large where politics were headed in the United States? And I kind of yearn for the days that we return back to that, because I think that there's a way that you can be principled, you can stand on your morals and your ethics, but you don't have to be the flamethrower. You don't have to scream and yell and call everybody names during the process. You can simply say, I don't agree with that, and I'm not going to bend on it. And that's it.
And that's House, Senate, presidency, and maybe even the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is such it's in an interesting time. We know that with presidents appointing justices, that the way they lean when they appoint people is based on, conservative or more liberal leanings. But that's not a position that has been politicized in the past the way that it has been politicized for the last 20 years. I mean, I think you go back to Bush and his appointment of John Roberts as kind of the last somewhat apolitical. I know conservatives have looked at John Roberts as, hey, that's a conservative justice. I don't know that his voting record necessarily backs that up. But since then, whether you're talking about Obama appointments, Trump appointments, Biden appointments, or if that arises again, will we ever get away from the political nature that now exists at our highest court in the land?
That's a very good question. And I don't have the answer for that. I hope that there is a return to kind of what the judiciary branch is supposed to do. But there's a mindset. This strikes at a fundamental mindset. This is the baseline of conservatives versus liberals, where one views the law as the law and not open to further interpretation or a living document. Let's just take the Constitution, for example. Liberals look at that as a living document that changes, that can be interpreted in different ways. Conservatives do not. And so when we inject that kind of ideology into the Supreme Court on various sides, you're going to get the court to follow whoever's in charge. And so we see a lot of that. The activist judges or the activist clerks that are in the Supreme Court now that are politicizing intentionally. I mean, we saw a leak come out of the Supreme Court a couple of years ago. Where's the last time that ever happened? That never happens.
Never happens. William Russell, you got time to hang with us for just a couple more minutes?
You got it, buddy.
William Russell, former advisor to the Trump campaign. He was the state director in Mississippi, and he is with Ballard Partners in D.C. Partner there. We're back with you right after this. Mornings with Richard Cross. William Russell is my guest. It's Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi. William, a former advisor and state director for the Mississippi Trump campaign and a partner at Ballard Partners in Washington, D.C. He joins us from D.C. this morning. Whether you like him or not, and it seems like many don't, James Comey is a smart guy. Former director of the FBI, former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, former deputy U.S. attorney. Smart guy. And I'm supposed to believe that smart guy has no idea what 8647 might have stood for on the beach. And so I frame it with the smart guy thing because he has very carefully crafted an answer to this question that he has now repeated at least twice, once on an MSNBC show and then with Stephen Colbert on the Late Show last night, where he talks about this walk on the beach with his wife, and she was a server, and he thought 86 meant... What are we doing here with the former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation? Kind of playing dumb?
Simply revealing his position, and I think a lot of people who believe what he believes, they're simply revealing how they feel, how stupid they feel the American public truly are. That's the way that I view this. Like, that you would do something that blatantly crass. Some in the Trump circles have called it illegal. But you do something that crass and try to wipe it away as, oh, he didn't know, as if the American public they're going to buy that. That says to me a variety of different things. It says how much the hubris that he has to even do something like that and think he can get away with it. So it's an arrogance. But it also says, I don't believe that the American public, people who are following me on social media, who are seeing this, they're not smart enough to believe that I would do something like this maliciously and with intent. Which, as the director of the FBI and as a lawyer who prosecuted criminals, he understands full well what intent is. You have to have intent with crimes that are being committed. I mean, that's like one of the key things in order to get that upcharge. And he's saying that he thinks that we're all dumb enough to believe his silly story. And he gets rewarded for that by going on the Stephen Colbert show. He gets rewarded.
Well, and so I agree with your characterization. Crass, illegal, probably not. Actually a call for an assassination of the sitting president, maybe a stretch, although there are a lot of wackos out there. We have seen that. But is Comey paying
assassinations? That's the reality.
Yeah, exactly. But is Comey playing 3D chess here? In terms of, he's got a book that he's peddling. It wasn't getting the attention that it needed up to the launch. He did something that he knew would grab attention, and all of a sudden, well, they may not want me to come on to talk about my book, but hey, I can sure talk about this and then also talk about the book on a wider stage than he might have gotten otherwise.
I mean, I suppose that may be a publicity stunt, but in the world of that, you and I just finished having this conversation about de-escalating the tone and the tenor of politics in this country and kind of where we would like to get back. That is certainly not the response. He is part of the problem that we're talking about here, the problem that we've identified. And I don't want to reward that with book purchases. I don't want to reward that with airtime. I don't want to see that happen. It's stuff like that continually escalating that's going to put this American public even more on edge than they already are, with a 24-hour news cycle that constantly hits them with all the bad things that are happening.
And then there's Jake Tapper, who actually had a co-author on the book that nobody knows about, Alex Thompson from Axios. I want to get to this, William. I was really struck. A lot of the Truth Social posts from Donald Trump, I kind of roll my eyes at. I thought there was a lot of meat on the bone on this one from yesterday when he said Joe Biden was not for open borders. He never talked about open borders where criminals of all kinds, shapes, sizes can flow into the country at will. It wasn't his idea to open the border and almost destroy our country. Moving ahead, he says the Joe Biden that everybody knew would never allow drug dealers, gang members, and the mentally insane to come into our country totally unchecked and unvetted. All anybody has to do is look at his record. I thought there were two really interesting things there. One, the way he characterized the former president, Joe Biden. And two, pointing to the treasonous people who were running the government while an incapacitated Joe Biden was carrying the title of President of the United States. And what it sounds like is a warning and kind of like a first salvo of, we're going to find out who you were and we're coming after you.
Maybe it's just
feel free to disagree.
That potentially, I don't know, obviously, the man's intent, where his head's at on this without asking him. That could very well be the case, or it could just be a point that we're trying to make to the American people of, like, it's not the person in power, it's the support staff around him. And when he talks about deep state, what is the deep state? Who is the deep state? Where are they? What office building can we find them in? That's the point he's trying to make with a statement like that. If the people that are around him that are helping inform his decision making, because at the end of the day, Joe Biden was still president, so I can't absolve him of all of the responsibility here. Even though, to the president's point, Joe Biden's early track record as a senator, he wouldn't have been for anything like this.
No,
I would say though that that's kind of the point here. Is this problem that we have in Washington, D.C. runs much deeper than the man who sits and sleeps in the White House. And that's the point. Like, I think back about, when alive during this time, so I read about Ronald Reagan during the, and when he was president, and the kind of work that he had to do to drain the swamp that he was operating in. This was not like a couple of years and then we're done. This was something that spanned throughout his entire presidency of trying to fix a broken Washington, D.C. So the issues that we're talking about here are not new. This is not an original idea. I think that the president this time around certainly understands now. He has a better grasp of what he's stepping into and just how deep it runs. Now, are all the problems in the world going to get fixed under this Trump administration? Absolutely not. There are always going to be problems in the world, and there's always going to be things that are left undone that we need to do. But he now is taking, I believe, a different approach, and we've already talked about this, the different approach that he's taking, more tactful approach in trying to solve some of the issues, and we're seeing that play out in Congress. Now, Congress, the group, the lot of them, don't really come together. We still have a long way to go before this bill, a reconciliation bill, all of these tax cuts, the big, beautiful bill, lands on the president's desk. But he's at least being more thoughtful in the way that he's approaching Congress. Never should the president ever be the president of Congress. He's the president of the United States. But he is doing a very good job wielding his power and his influence to get the job done right now.
When will that bill finally make it to his desk?
That's a good question, because what's going to end up happening is this bill is going to pass out of the House, likely because of the movement that this morning, early this morning, out of the Budget Committee. We're on target to meet the Speaker Johnson's deadlines.
Memorial Day.
So it'll get kicked over to the Senate, but they're going to do a full gut and replace. It's going to look nothing like what the House passed. And the Senate, what I imagine Majority Leader Thune is thinking right now. So there are a couple of deadlines. There's the debt ceiling increase, and then there's also the government shutdown in September. What I would assume is going to happen is he's going to allow his senators to put what they want to in the bill, sit on it to a very short time left on the clock, and then pass it out of the Senate, kick it over to the House and say, this is yours to pass. Either pass it or don't. Pass it and don't pass it and have either the government default on its debt, or have the government shut down, those two periods, or pass it and we're moving on to next year.
If you like political gamesmanship, just hang around. It's not going anywhere. William Russell, partner at Ballard Partners, former advisor to the Trump campaign, and chair of the state campaign in Mississippi. Always appreciate the time, William. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Richard.
Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Take a timeout. When we come back, we're going to be joined by the Attorney General, Lynn Fitch, who is on her way to the southern border. We'll do that coming up next on MRC.